In hand, we're at the beginning of the Parsha, chapter 37 of Preis, and I'd just like to look tonight at a little bit, scratch the surface of how Yosef and his brothers, for lack of a better word, the interface between them, the degree of interaction, and scratch a tiny bit beneath the surface, looking at two elements. So that'd be just the opening verses, starting with the second pasuk. Eila told us Yaakov. We describe here Yosef ben Shvas Reish Shana. He's 17 years old. Roa esachov baton, shepherding the flocks with his brothers. V'hu na'ar b'nei vilha u'v'nei zilpa nasher aviv. So we make reference to the fact he's playing a role with Echav, with his brethren. That would include the children of three wives, at least, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, potentially his brother Binyamin through Rachel as well. But now we focus on some relationship he has with the Bnei Bilhah and Bnei Zilpah. And he brought some type of bad matters to his father about them. So there's a comment of Rashi which generates much discussion. Rashi defines the distinction. Someone made me there, but Rashi makes a distinction between the relationship he has with the sons of Leah and the relationship he has with his sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And as Rashi describes it, the Torah highlighting in this pasuk, Bnei Bilhah and Bnei Zilpah, indicates that he had a special level of relationship with them. And the way Rashi explains it is that they were being treated as second-class citizens by the sons of Leah. Sons of Leah said, "We are the sons of the first wife of Jacob, the sons of for many years, until Rachel has children, the primary producer of children, and certainly the one who produced the most children, and the one from whom leadership stems. And the children of Leah were treating the children of Bilhah and Zilpah as if their mothers were never full-fledged, equal rights wives together with Leah. And Yosef was coming to bat for them. I'm with you guys. And despite the fact that I'm also a child of a primary wife, child of Rachel, Jacob's preferred wife, I'm with you. And I'll see to it that you are, I'll build you back up to be equal brothers. The problem that many ask is that, well, if that's the case, and the text is describing that he has a especially close relationship with the children of Bilhah and Zilpah, why were they not there for him when we get to the point of the sale? There are four sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, so two of each. Plus, you have Binyamin's out of the picture, and Yosef is the party being looked at. So you have six sons of Leah against four sons of Bilhah. That's not so unevenly stacked. And we know actually later on, Reuven isn't eager to see that Yosef is done away with. So that's really balanced things out. So if in fact the text is describing that Yosef was there for the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, and he had them, feeling very comfortable and actually feeling indebted to him, why no indication of that later on at the time of the challenge against Yosef? Ramban, among others, raises this question. Ramban takes an approach that reads very differently than Rashi, but I don't want to go there, that gets complicated. Is there a way to defend, to explain within the way Rashi is describing it, why we find that Yosef seems to be generating the ire of all the brothers? All the brothers are ready to have him destroyed or sold, and without these four coming to his defense. So in the Sifsei Chachamim, who's one of the primary collections of commentaries to Rashi, he notes, let's look at the verses. When was there a first reference to a hatred between any of the brothers and Yosef? So in verse 2, we describe Yosef, his brothers, and the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And we mention that Yosef is bringing the matters of concern, which according to Rashi's approach is only about the sons of Leah. He's kvetching to his father that the sons of Leah are mistreating the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. But there's no reference yet to hatred, even by the sons of Leah. It seems that much as this probably wasn't something that they were thrilled about, they got it. They got the fact that Yosef's challenges against them had some logic, made some sense. If we have time, maybe we can get into other arguments as to what other points he may have been challenging them on. And they got it, even if they were not happy about it, but there's no hatred yet. Then, verse 3, Yisrael loves Yosef more than all the others. He's a ben zekunim, usually translated as son of his old age. Others understand one to be the greatest level of Torah attachment in terms of scholarship, the one who looked most like Jacob. And he gives him this cloak that indicates his nobility. And now, who hates him in verse 4? So in verse 2, we had a split. We have the sons, we have all the collective brothers, and we have the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. Now there's a hatred described in verse 4. Who is that? Who's vayisneu oso? Who's hating him? No split over here. No indication that this is just a small subset. So the Sifsei Chachamim back in the earlier verse says at this point, when it came to the point of Jacob highlighting Joseph, pulling him out of the pool, giving him this distinction, now there's a disturbance among all the brethren. The word hate, it's hard to know how to translate this word vayisneu oso, but it's certainly not loving. It's certainly just a great disturbance and a great angst. So let's try to get into the mindset of the brothers at this juncture, including the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. You imagine you're one of the brothers and you know a little bit about Jewish history. Right now, there's not a lot of Jewish history to know. It would be a pretty short course, right? Your grandpa Abraham, great-grandpa Abraham started this program. How many of Abraham's sons carry on the chain in terms of the eternal destiny of the Abrahamic covenant with God? One. Now, Abraham has many sons. He's Ishmael. Later on, he has more sons with Keturah. One son plays that role of carrying on this chain. Then, next stage of Jewish history, you've got Yitzchak. How many of his sons carry on the chain? Exactly, one. You don't know the plan at this juncture. Your father is highlighting one son and giving him the cloak of nobility, some indication in the garb would be exactly what the material was, but something that would reflect on this being distinction, higher rank, and quite possibly, and he's given him, we mentioned when it says he's the son of his old age, others translate that as the one who looks most like his father and the one who has had the shared scholarship with his father. Yaakov is putting greater energy in terms of passing on the Torah that's necessary to carry on to the future to Joseph. Where does that leave the rest of us? This is a great risk, because if in fact Yaakov was doing to Yosef what Abraham did to Yitzchak, and what Yaakov did, well, eventually what Yitzchak did eventually to Yaakov, and that's what Yaakov is doing to Yosef, we're going to be pushed out of the show over here. And even if in fact we don't think we'll go the route of a Yishmael or an Esav, well, we'll certainly be reduced to some potentially very secondary role in the future of Israel. And that is disturbing to everybody, including the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And here we have the first reference to the angst against Yosef, which is secured, bolstered by the dreams that Yosef tells over. And you really perceive yourself as in a leadership position with the rest of us secondary to you. That has us worried. That has us scared. And that has us later on feel justified in wanting to reduce your level of control and of authority. Now, how far can we go with that? So let's add another layer over here. How would this translate to the brothers feeling comfortable doing Yosef in? Because again, eventually get to that attempt, ready to kill him, switch that to the sale. As soon as that happens, they sit down to have a dinner, no indication of guilt. They feel very confident that what they did was right. So for that, we need to pull back one more step. They see Yaakov favoring Yosef. How do they view Yosef? How do they rank Yosef's capacity to carry on this chain of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? What do we know about Yosef? What do we know that they knew about Yosef? So if you combine what the text tells us and what the Midrash understands by nuance in the text, as well as other elements of the tradition being passed down, we know that Yosef has a great talent to be a great leader to the outside world. We know it because we see eventually it was manifest. And even if it's not yet at a stage that it's happened, we see this is in his nature. He's the capacity when he's in the dungeon, when he's in the house of Potiphar, eventually when he's in the house of the Paro, he takes charge. He's a leader that can get things done in big time for the outside world, very worldly. He's also very focused on his physical beauty. I did this. When he did this, he actually had hair to touch, right? And he would actually be able to be grooming his hair and focused on his beauty. Not what we think of in terms of Abraham or Yitzchak or Yaakov. Neither of these traits. I mean, Abraham is called the Prince of God, but not that we see him actively taking a role of directing the outside world. He's a Prince of God because he can teach the world about God. They see in Yosef character that just not quite the picture we have of who's meant to carry on the chain. But our father Yaakov is favoring Yosef to carry on the chain. He's sending the Jewish destiny down the wrong path. As some very sophisticated works on the history of Hanukkah and the big picture of Hanukkah put it, they view Yosef as somewhat Greek-like. They view Yosef as focused on the external elements that Greece was known for, that Greece was meant to be able to use to complement the Jewish world. Way back in the time of Noah, Noah gave a blessing to his son Yefet. Yaft Elokim liyefes v'yishkom ba'alei Shem. Shem, the Semites. We come from Shem. Avram's from Shem. We're all the Semites from Shem. Yefes was given a blessing that the beauty of Yefes will coexist with Shem. And that, Rashi tells us, is Yavan, Greece, which in Noah, we know that Yavan is a child of Yefes. And the most beautiful element of Yefes, of Yofi, was Greece. Greece had the capacity to be a great ally with Israel. Israel, we're the battery pack of her spirituality, and they would be the loudspeaker that would take the message out to the world through their art, through their philosophy, through their science, through their focus on the supremacy of man. We share with them a lot. Supremacy of man, the sage being at the top of the hierarchy of society. But we do it as we're the supremacy of man because we're in God's image and we have the capacity to be God-like. They do it and push away God. The first society in history to depict men without some type of a head covering. And the first society probably in world history to reduce their gods to pettiness and immaturity and hang-ups and failure because we don't need them anymore. We're at the top. So Greece had a capacity and they were meant to be a great ally with Israel, but instead of being a great enlightening agent to take the wisdom of Torah and make it known by the world, they become darkness. And of course, the miracle of Hanukkah is God's putting his stamp of approval on our battle against Greece with light. The brothers, as some put this, a very sophisticated work by Rabbi Matus Weinberg called Patterns in Time. The first volume he published was volume 8 because he was talking about Hanukkah and he wanted that to be first. But to get a level of sophistication, when I lived in Chicago, there was a gentleman there who had the largest ever fellowship granted by the University of Chicago in philosophy. When he finished that fellowship, he thought he had absorbed all the world's knowledge. And then he became exposed to Torah, and specifically the oral Torah. And he said, then life started. And I shared with him my copy of that book 1 year. He read through it, like, I don't know, a few hours, read through the whole book. The next year, he took off 2 days of work to work through this book and see the sophistication of Hanukkah and the sophistication of the web of how all Torah fits together. As he describes in that work, they perceive Yosef as out of bounds. You've crossed the line. You are not a legitimate heir to this system. They were missing one key ingredient. I'll try to put this on my screen over here without throwing everything off here. A quick chat to the screen. They view 2 terms over here. The first will be, gotta switch my Hebrew. Sorry, here my Hebrew keyboard is not loading up. Here we go. This term is Greece. That's Yavan. They missed the point, though. Yosef was not Yavan. Yosef is known as the tzaddik. The tzaddik, if you add the tzaddik to Yavan, you have the second term. If they showed up over there, Yavan is Yud Vav Nun, and Tzion. You add the tzaddik to Yavan, and you have what Yavan was supposed to be. What Greece was supposed to be was an agent that what Yosef does throughout the rest of what we know about Yosef. He's preaching about God in Potiphar's house, in the dungeon, to the paro. It's not me that can answer your dream. It's God. He uses his talents, his resources, his capacity to be connected with the world, and even his physical beauty, ultimately as tools of Kiddush Hashem rather than the opposite. And that was their mistake. Unfortunately, the brothers made one tragic error. A lot of their calculation made some sense. But whenever we make a calculation, okay, sorry. Whenever we make a calculation,
I just repeated it because you sent it only to me.
Oh, okay. So there should be 2 terms. Okay, maybe the second one didn't go out here. I want to say, yeah, okay, Yavan Sion. Okay, thank you. So you have the Yavan, the Yud Vav Nun, and then you add the Tzadi, and you have the add the Tzadik to it. And you have Sion, which basically is us. So just in closing, what their big mistake was, they should have paused to ponder. We are making a calculation that Yosef seems to be a dangerous track, because if he's going to be the future of Israel, this is Greece. It's all wrong. They were biased against seeing the tzaddik component that would allow the correction and the blending, the synthesizing of all of that into something that ultimately would be spiritually glorious. What does one do when one is making a decision and one, by all logic, has to realize I may have some subjective motivation over here? It's slightly possible this is coming from a place of personal jealousy. It could be that this is coming from something other than pure objective truth. You need to turn to an outside party. The brothers should have had to detect, maybe, just maybe, there's some bias over here, and check with Yaakov. Maybe they were afraid Yaakov is already caught up with Yosef. There's one more person who is still alive over here, who perhaps could have been that objective party to whom they could have double-checked with. Yitzchak is still alive. At the time of the sale, Yitzchak is still alive. And again, in their mind's eye, they were doing something that felt so right. We're protecting the destiny of Israel. But human nature, any of us in this chat who are human have probably, at some point in our lives, made a decision that we thought was purely intellectual. And reality, if you look back at it, probably was some subjectivity over there. And that's what the Mishnah preaches about, finding the Rav and finding the Chaver. We got to find somebody with whom we can check in and say, hey, give me the knowledge, give me the wisdom. And someone can check in and say, hey, what would you do in my shoes without my personal biases over here? So unfortunately, not having done that leads to the failure and the tragedy of that sale. But here at least gives some perspective to what were they thinking, what's going on over here, and how Yosef ultimately represents something that, despite their concerns, can live on with all of its beauty as a significant part of the Jewish world rather than something that had to be ousted. With which wish everybody a healthy and a happy Hanukkah and a good Shabbos. And
Hanukkah, thank you, Rabbi Preis. That's fascinating.
I'll be well.
something I missed, the idea of Yosef and Yavan, and that's what the brothers, that was their din against Yosef. That's sort of Matzes Weinberg's pshat?
No, he's quoting some earlier sources. He's quoting the fact that they viewed Yosef, not literally as Yavan, but basically as the same way we view Yavan, as that you can't coexist with us, but that's because Yavan is not going to tzaddik root. Had Yavan simply said, we'll use all of our talents for righteousness, they were phenomenal tools that could have boosted, like we see, he's referring to that Gemara, that a Torah can be written in ancient Greek. The only other language that Torah is legitimately written in, aside from Hebrew, is Yavanis, because there was some element of Yavan that had its place in our Aron Kodesh. Because Yavan was meant to be light. Unfortunately, they took all of their wisdom and turned it to darkness. So the Gullus of Yavan is called Choshech back in Medrash and Bereshis. But the message is there can be a correcting of that. And Yosef was really that. He was that from the start. He was right. I'll add another layer over here, just something to think about. He takes it a lot further. I think it's a Bnei Yissaschar that he's quoting. I'm not sure. It's a long time since I read the book. But eventually in history, Yosef and Yehuda come back together. We know there's an idea of a Mashiach of both of them. In history, the reuniting, the tribes are seen mostly as Yosef at the helm. There's meant to be a reuniting. And that will be the correcting. Each gullus is meant to be corrected, a correcting of that exile of Yavan. But he says this is stunning. Where was the first time there was a level of a reuniting of Yehuda and Yosef? I mean, the brothers are represented by Yehuda and Yosef. The first level of reuniting, sort of, when they come down to Egypt to buy the food, but there, at first, they don't even know it's Yosef. And then it's a very tense moment, and then we don't know if Yaakov will join us. Will we actually reunite? The first real reuniting of Yehuda and Yosef is when Yaakov sent Yehuda Gimel Shin Nun Hey Goshna, sent him down to Goshen to set up shop over there. But the Bnei Yissaschar says the 4 letters on the dreidel are a lot more sophisticated than Neis Gadol Hayasham. And he goes on there to explain why the dreidel represents this. When you're spinning together, that's really uniting you together, 2 parts that meet. So he takes it to far, far layers and levels of how this is a throughout history element of the Israel and Yavan tension. But for us right now in the Yosef issue is that it's important for us to recognize that a lot of what Yavan, the world thinks they got a lot from Yavan. They got philosophy and they got science and art. For the most part, those initially were used by Yavan really as ways to stifle an appreciation of anything divine and anything religious. Yavan was very eager to make man at the top of the charts, and we don't need gods. And the brothers, in a sense, saw Yosef as leading that direction. How can you be focused and have the talent to run a world and be a Yaakov? How can you be focused on physical beauty and be a Yitzchak? Right? It doesn't work, but it can if you're a tzaddik. And if you're a tzaddik, you can use all those as tools for greater elevation and enhancement.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
A wonderful Shabbos. Happy Hanukkah.
It is Shabbos, Happy Hanukkah.